protect your family legacy. That's the fancy title that we put for this video. It's also, to some extent, and Mallory wouldn't let me put this in the title, it's how to make sure you don't raise completely spoiled brats or spoiled rotten kids. I've got a bunch of them, 4 of them, and I want to make sure they're not spoiled. So I'm trying to do all these same things that I'm about to talk with you through. A lot easier, by the way, said than done. If you're a parent, it's one of the main worries you have, particularly if you have money and you have kids. How do you make sure they don't end up spoiled? I've talked a lot about this. So that's one thing we'll cover today in this Facebook Live. And then I also want to talk about leaving a legacy. So what are some of the primary pieces that you want to put in place today while you're living while the sky is blue, to make sure that all the money that you have earned in your life and saved and net worth continues to serve the purposes and the areas that you really believe in. So those are 2 different conversations, but it really starts with this concept of how do we make sure our kids understand and value money. And that's really where I think this starts, is that as long as your children end up with your values and your ethic, as in work ethic, then a lot of the rest of this will fall into place. So that's where we want to start. So number 1, I want you to be able to give, and again, I'm trying to do all these same things, work in progress. I know it's easier said than done. But 1, give the gift of earning to your children so that they understand what it takes to earn a dollar in America. Number 2, and I'm going to go into these. Number 2, give them the gift of giving and how to give and where to give. And number 3, the gift of education, and that education also has to do with the education around money. So here's a couple of thoughts in each one of these really important categories: earning, giving, and education. Number 1, at a very early age, and if you are in your 40s or your 50s or 60s, we started working a lot sooner than the kids in the world we live in today start working. But when I was younger, and a lot of you watching were younger, we started working when we were 8, 9, 10, 11. Whatever that number was, is a lot earlier than what our kids probably do today. But I would encourage all of us to get our kids working as soon as possible, whether it's just easy jobs, whether it's clerical, where it's babysitting, where it's yard work. These are all the things that the kids, anybody can get started with. But I think it's also good to have a boss. So it's one thing to work for mom and dad. It's another thing to work for a neighbor or somebody else who has some sort of tangential authority. It's not mom and dad. Mom, I don't want to do it. Dad, I don't want to do it. It's very different if you're working for someone else. And we all have a boss, no matter, even if we have our own companies, we all are employed to some extent by someone. So it's a great way to start early on. Number 3 is that teach them entrepreneurship and teach them the value of working for themselves, whether the value or the ethic that comes with entrepreneurship. It doesn't mean they have to have their own companies when they grow up, but they have to understand taking on the responsibility and managing the risk of having their own enterprise or their own task or their own job. So I think it's a really important thing to teach. When I was a child, I developed a summer camp for kids in my neighborhood. When I was 15, I had like 30 kids running around, a couple counselors, and it was a really good lesson in building a company that was also really a profitable enterprise that was a lot of fun to do. So that's this as my phone is ringing. My kids, we have a company where we sell we sell hats. I mean, it's here. I'll show you this. So this is impromptu. I have this up here next to the Trump doll. But we make these wet moose hats, and we've got several versions of this. This summer, we'll be putting more emphasis on selling. In the world we live in today, it's different than when you and I were kids. We could set up a retail store for very little money, using different applications around the web. And if you don't know how to do this as a programmer, of course you could find one. And we're talking in the hundreds of dollars, not hundreds of thousands or even thousands, to get a retail store up and running. So we did this test last year. We had some hats that got sold at a mountain store, and now the kids are really looking forward to taking this to another level. So teach them entrepreneurship. Of course, also, one of the things that I don't think gets talked about enough, and we tell our kids to go do what they love. And I've got one of my 4 is very musical, and maybe he wants to be a rock star one day, right? But we also have to make sure they understand the difference between what a hedge fund manager makes and a hairdresser makes. And there's nothing wrong with going in either route. You can call the hedge fund managers yuppie scumbags. You could call the hairdressers, people that aren't making. They could be doing more fiscally or earning more of a living. But we want our kids to all do whatever they love to do. I don't care if my kid's a musician, but I want him to understand the financial profile that comes along with these different paths. And when you're a kid, unless someone tells you, it's very hard to understand. I'm going to embark on this lifelong path that might never really pay me a whole lot of money. That's something they have to understand at an early age. That's something that most people don't find out till later in life, and usually too late to change course fiscally. So I want us to be able to have those conversations with our children, even though, yes, of course, we wanted them to do exactly what they love to do best. Number 2, give the gift of giving, meaning that I want you to be able to show them how powerful it is to give to the charities that you really put a focus in. And if you're giving money, you want them to participate in this. There's the difference between just giving money and actually doing something where I'll bring my kids. It's not just about giving money to an online pledge, or every Christmas we do Clark Howard Kids and we go to a Walmart. I want the kids to be there and do the shopping. I want the kids to be there and look at the list of the kids that we're buying for and the wishes of these children from foster homes in Georgia that don't have anybody to A, raise them, B, to give them anything during Christmas. So I want my kids to actually do the shopping and not just see dad give money to the cause. The other part here is that when it comes to giving, as a family, you very simply, and Fidelity does a wonderful job of this, Schwab does a wonderful job of this, but donor advised funds are a really easy way to set up $5,000, $10,000, all the way up to $100 million, and have a system in place to then give to the causes that your family really believes in. I'm going to talk about that legacy piece in just a second. And then, of course, the gift of education. We all know this when it comes to how do we really teach our kids about the value and the power of money and how difficult it is. And the first step as a parent is to be able to say no, is to say, look, we can't have everything that we ask for. We can't get a new car when we're 16. And I still think there's some parents out there that do that. But of course, we have to have them understand that they can't have everything, and no is a huge first step there. And then delayed gratification for our kids is another giant piece of that equation. We also have to get them excited, and this is the education of money, about, in my opinion, I'm a big believer in investing. So I've talked about this in the past where I have a Motif account, which is it's a great technology company that allows you to have thematic baskets of companies. So we have the Moss discretionary basket of all the things that we spend, all the companies that ultimately we spend money with in America. And there's 30 of these companies that we do this with. And my kids will fight over whether we can sell Under Armour and buy Nike, or buy Nike and sell Under Armour, or look at some of the companies that ultimately, if they have if we're using a Mac, do we own Apple? If we're using Windows, do they own a Microsoft product? Those are really important conversations for kids to understand that, hey, the family's doing business with these companies. I own even our utility companies. We own Southern Company in that because we pay Georgia Power. So all of these are examples that teach our kids that when we spend money, it's typically going to a big publicly traded company somewhere. It's a great way to teach them about investing. And in the modern day world, Motif, which is the website and the app that I use to do this, is a really great tool to do that. Now, as far as leaving a legacy, this is when you start to get a real net worth, couple $1 million, $2, $3, $5, $10 million, of course, and higher, you're going to leave money behind, and you very likely will be in a position to leave permanent money behind, meaning that this money gets set aside that's always going to go to charity. And if you have the ability to do that as an individual for the rest of your family, that's a really powerful position to be in. And this is where what I call a family legacy mission statement really comes in. So you as the grandparent, or you as the parent, you want to be able to say, and remember, we just came out with a tax code, if we're not going back to breaking news here, But remember, the initial tax code was 1 page. That's all it was. It was a 1 page, big picture. Here's how we're going to change the tax code, or at least they wanted to change the tax code. That's all you need to do as a family. We have a 1 page mission statement that says, when we live, this is not a legally binding document. This is something for the family to rally around to avoid conflict and get people on the same path of virtue, if you will. And that really comes back to you determining where this money needs to go and how it needs to get gifted over time. Maybe your family wants to only save the trees in your neighborhood and replant and never chop anything down. Maybe it is a plan to take care of kids who can't afford to go to college and you provide scholarships. So there's so many ways to do that. Maybe it's helping to feed the hungry or the homeless in your city particularly. It's a program to do job training for underprivileged Americans. There's so many ways to do this and so many ways to help. It's about communicating to your family so that your wishes, and this is your money that you spent a lifetime accumulating and saving and growing, that get carried out when you're no longer here. And that's a really powerful tool, but it starts with communicating that to the family. And by the way, when it comes to understanding who's going to carry a lot of this out, you will over time, if you start thinking about this, you start talking about this to your family, the cream to some extent rises to the top, knowing that, hey, these are the people or members of the family that are really going to be able to help carry this out. And that's a powerful and important reason to start talking about it. Hey, Thanksgiving, it's coming up. What a good time to start the conversation. Rip the Band-Aid off and get talking about it. And then if you are so inclined, at some point, you've got to sit down and spend a little bit of time doing some sort of family legacy mission statement that will be a very powerful tool for you and your family. Really, it could be for the next 100 years. So start planning it today. Thanksgiving, a great time to start. Thank you for tuning into this Facebook Live. We talked about planning your legacy, really, how to make sure you're not raising spoiled brats. Hope this is something that you enjoyed and learned from and this perspective. Find us at Wes Moss Money Matters on YouTube and Facebook. Have a wonderful, profitable rest of your day.